Today we're going to talk about harvesting our snapdragons. Now this is about the ideal time to cut your snapdragons if you're going to be selling them for wraps or for weddings, because you'll get a nice long vase life. However, if you're anything like me and you're growing them for garden decoration primarily, then you can pick them whenever you want. Now usually you would harvest your snapdragons when the first few flowers are open. The flowers will fall as soon as they've been pollinated. However, if you've got our special double snapdragons, the pollinators can't get to them quite as quickly, so it's less important, and you end up with great fat stems full of flowers, where the traditional varieties just tend to have flowers on the very top. Let me show you. If we look at these traditional shaped snapdragons, for example, can you see all the flowers have been pollinated and have fallen, so you've only got flowers on the very top of the stems because the bees can easily get in to access the pollen. Where these stems, because they're double flowers, they are stopping the bees from pollinating them quite as quickly, and that gives you a tower of blooms that you otherwise wouldn't be able to achieve. My picture's been photobombed. Look at that. Now, once you've selected your blooms for cutting, I will only cut the stem as low as it needs to be for the vase or the arrangement, because it will branch and it will rebloom in about 3 or 4 weeks, but it will never get as tall and the flowers will never be as big as they are now. So what I will do is I will cut it down to about here, and then that will give it a chance to rebloom, and I'll still have really good, quite tall garden decoration. Now, once you've cut your flowers, you should get another flush. They will never be quite as big as they are now. If you didn't pinch them at all, they would have been enormous and probably too big to use. So we pinched them, and that gave us up to 5 blooms instead of just the 1. Once you cut them, you're essentially pinching again, and then you will get another rash of stems which will be much smaller, but you'll end up with much more flowers. They take about 3 to 4 weeks to bloom, and they will only grow as tall as they can in that period. So you don't really want to floor them, because otherwise you'll end up with more blooms, but they'll end up being quite low down in the garden. The stems are incredibly tall at the moment, so I'll only cut them as low as I need them for the vase or the arrangement, giving a good piece of stem to stay in place and to branch from, giving me the height. This colour mix is really useful to use as an example because all the colours are different. So you can see that we've got 4 flowers from this one plant and 2 more flowers to come, so 5 stems following pinching. So when you cut this, it will branch again. You'll never end up with flowers quite as big as this again, but you will have more of them. They'll take about 3 weeks, depending on the weather, take about 3 weeks to reflower. So just to recap, I'm not cutting the plant down to the ground. I'm only cutting the stem the exact length that I need it for the arrangement, leaving a good proportion of the plant in place. It will branch from that point, and that means that I will have good garden display for my second flush of flowers. Rather than tell you, why don't I show you? I'm going to run some videos for you now, taking you back to last summer. So I'm just giving my snapdragons a bit of a fierce deadheading, and what will happen is in a few weeks, I did these ones earlier, can you see the wound? In a few weeks, 3 or 4 new stems will wake up and flower in place of the 1 bloom that you took away. They're going to be more slender, but they are going to be fresh. So here's some snapdragons that I've just deadheaded, and these side shoots are going to start to wake up. Here are some that were done about a week ago, and then these were done about 2.5 weeks ago, and then these were done about 3 weeks ago. You can see blooming again. The stems are more slender, but the flowers are fresh. There, can you see? That's the stump where we've been deadheading these snapdragons. And look, they're not even batting an eye at the rain, and they are flowering again. Absolutely amazing. They do take ages, which is why we love to autumn jumpstart them, because then they can take their sweet time, and then we do another batch in the spring. So these are the autumn jump starter snapdragons, and that's the reason why they are so tall and magnificent. And over my other shoulder you can see that we've got the startings of the late winter or early spring sown snapdragons. So why, if I've got these magnificent beauties, have I bothered with a second sowing? For two reasons. The first reason is for a continuous harvest. There will be a gap in between us either cutting or deadheading our autumn jump starter snapdragons and then reblooming. That gap is covered by the late winter or early spring sown snapdragons and their first blooms. Oh, this is lovely. So this is the Madam Butterfly mix. Let me step back. Isn't it nice? So I've just got to capture it on the camera now. Lovely. It's the 3rd of August, and you can see that for the most part the autumn jump starter snapdragons have all been deadheaded and they're all budding up to rebloom, but we've still got fresh blooms coming through. This is from a slightly later spring sowing. The snapdragons have really saved our bacon this year, haven't they? Absolutely incredible. Oh my goodness me. Now these are the spring started snapdragons, which are in full rolling bloom now. It's incredible. Let me show you the reds. You're going to die. Look at these. And the second reason is that antirrhinums or snapdragons can get something called rust, especially if we have a wet summer. Now a fungicide does tend to do a very good job at keeping it at bay, but if you're not happy with using a fungicide, then the best way to protect your crop, to make sure that you've got a continuous supply of flowers, is just to have fresh plants, because the rust is more likely to appear on older plants, which is why we sow our snapdragons as annuals when they're actually technically a perennial plant, because over time an aging plant is much more susceptible to disease. Now if you want your snapdragon stems to be bolt upright and straight for flower arranging, then you need to condition them bolt upright and straight, because they are affected by gravity. So if they sit in the bucket slightly to the side, what will happen is the top of the flower will realign itself to gravity, and that can put a kink in the flower stem. I've got one that started to grow slightly on the wonk, so I can show you exactly what I mean. Now snapdragons are geotropic, which means it's gravity that makes their stems bend. So this stem has fallen over, and what's happened is the stem has now changed position in line with gravity to point straight up. Now what that means to you is, if you put the stems in the flower shed in the dark to condition overnight and they're not bolt upright, they will bend with gravity. So not light, gravity for snapdragons. So you need to keep the stems bolt upright while conditioning if you want the stems to be poker straight for arranging later. Now you tend not to really notice it that much with these great big fluffy double flowers, because look, we've got very little stem left, haven't we? And we're still yet to lose the first of the bloom from the stem. Aren't they terrific? It's your more traditional types that you tend to really notice it on, because you tend to pick them when they're younger. The ones here are just about perfect for picking, and you can see they've still got quite a plume on the top of the stem, and that's the bit that tends to go and bend on you. And when they've got this much of growth left, if you put them in a bucket at an angle, this is what you're going to wake up to in the morning. Oh, excuse me. Hello. and they'll be wonky if the stems are not dead straight. So keep your Snapdragons bolt upright if you need to have straight flowers.